Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
Welcome to this podcast. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. And welcome newcomers to our podcast. We love hearing that new people are joining us. We're Sharon less today. That means without Sharon. But we have a fantastic educator on our podcast today, Alan Wright. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Pleased to be with you.
Yeah, and again, because we had you last year, actually, and we were talking more about poetry, I think, so.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, Alan, what have you been, we'll have a bit of a chatty ramble, what have you been up to lately and in your life?
In my life, I've actually, the last couple of days, I've been shifting a lot of furniture because we have made a decision to paint our house both externally and internally. It was time, and so that's been fun. It's an interesting project, and to see the artistry of master painters is a joy to behold. So that's been an interesting couple of days watching that start to that project take place.
So you're not painting yourself. You've got other.
No. I do have a rich history of painting in the houses that I've lived in, but on this occasion, no, we wanted it done well and we wanted it done quickly. And one of the things that I don't do is paint quickly. So
yeah, I'm a bit the same.
Yeah,
we're a bit like the Sydney Harbour Bridge back here. We're doing it fairly slowly. I think we need to get somebody in to make it a bit quicker.
There you are. Right. Yes, often. I mean, I often find, I must admit, I find it's a bit like walking. I love walking. I've been doing a lot of that this year, but I also find painting therapeutic because I just switch off, put on some music, and away I go. So I don't mind it from that perspective, but I just, as I said earlier, I'm just that bit slow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and just highlights of your work that you've been doing, like recently or maybe in the past as well.
Recently I've gained a lot of joy from a program that's a joint collaboration between the Primary English Teachers Association of Australia, PETA, and the Victorian Government, called the Young Writers Program, and that's a 2-day program where young writers that have been identified as either having an aptitude or an interest in writing, I get to go in and spend 2 days helping them to identify a writing project that is close to their heart, basically, and giving them the choice of identifying, researching, preparing, and then launching that particular writing project. And I've had about 7 opportunities to be involved in that program, and it's an absolute joy. Working with kids that really want to be there and are really, gathering up as much information like sponges as they can. And then one of the things that we ask them to do is to go back and share their new learning with their fellow writers. So that's been great to watch. And often the teachers sit in on the sessions as well. So it's a professional learning opportunity as well as for teachers. So that's been a really interesting thing to do, particularly in the last 3 programs where I've been able to get back into school. So I have run it online, which is an interesting challenge over 2 days, but it's just wonderful to be in the company of young writers who have a real spark and an energy for what they're able to do. So to be able to reinforce with them the notion that this is something you own and this is something you're responsible for. It's a bit like I remember Donald Graves said something about how young writers, when they're given ownership over a writing task, will defy labour laws. They'll write and write and write. So that's exactly what happened over these recent programs, watching kids really, run with the idea of owning the project.
And what age groups are they?
Well, we're talking kids from round about grade 1 all the way through to year 10.
Wow. And many schools involved?
Yes, quite a number of schools. I've got some more programs coming up in the Mildura area, so right. I'm looking forward to that. Mm-hmm. They're hoping that the program can be extended beyond the end of this year, which would be a wonderful opportunity, I think.
Fantastic. And Alan, what are some highlights of things that you've done in your past, going back a bit?
Oh, going back a bit. Well, I must admit I still hold a spot in my heart for a program that a colleague and I started back in around about 1985, called Turretin Writers Week, where we would bring in 1,500 young writers from surrounding schools to the education centre that we were working at, and we would give them a week, various groups, being in the company of some of Australia's very best writers that were prominent at that time. If you think names like Paul Jennings, Alison Lester, Peter Pavey, people like this. We had screenwriters, we had poets, we had storytellers.
Wow.
And we also had a professional learning component for teachers across that period of time. And we ran that for probably about 7 years. And it culminated in 1990, where we were nominated for an award during the International Year of Literacy, and for our endeavours to promote literacy at the community level. So we were obviously quite chuffed at that recognition for the work that had come about. So that was a wonderful program to be involved in, and I know that there are kids now that have grown up realising that writing holds something for them.
Fantastic. It's just wonderful to have those authors helping us, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And Alan, you had a bit of a stint in New York.
I did.
As a consultant, yep.
Yes, I had the opportunity, both my wife Vicky and I, to work in New York, and we initially signed on for 1 year and stayed for 6. So, and the work really branched out. I had the opportunity to work with other consultants, training literacy. I think there were roughly 400 literacy coaches, school-based, that were trained in that period. So that was a wonderful initiative that I was able to be involved in. And also I did quite a lot of writing of curriculum materials for the City of New York, and was involved in the making of a series of videos that we used to support teachers in the most effective way of teaching literacy, reading and writing. So there was a lot going on. I got the opportunity to also work in upstate New York and also in schools in Baltimore. So I look back on that time fondly, because the opportunity to also have face-to-face contact with people that were some of my literacy heroes during that time was wonderful. And the colleagues that I got to work with, I'm sure that stimulated me to continue working when I came back home. So I look on that as a really rich part of my career in education.
Yeah, the network you built, the networks we build up as educators is wonderful, isn't it? And exciting to see the changes in teaching in classrooms. Yep.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I guess the thing of raising the capacity of teachers was a wonderful thing, and the growth in their self-belief.
Yeah.
One of the things that tended to happen is that the teachers that grew and gained confidence often were poached by other districts outside the city of New York, because people also saw their potential. So it was wonderful to get to know teachers and kids in another system, and to contribute in the way that we all got to do. So as I said, I look on that as a wonderful part of my career. And, people like Ralph Fletcher, getting to know his work and getting to know him, that was wonderful. And I finally caught up with him again in Darwin back in 2014. And he's going to present at the ALEA conference in Darwin. Unfortunately, it's only online, but at least it'll be an opportunity to hear Ralph speak again. So that will be wonderful.
And for young teachers listening to our podcast, we'll be mentioning some names that they may not have heard of, but they can certainly get in touch with those people through the books that they've written.
Certainly.
Yeah, and we'll give some links to some resources or websites that.
Correct. I'm going to mention a couple of Ralph's books later on.
Yeah. And Alan, look, let's go on to our topic today, which is teaching writing effectively. Now, sometimes teachers find this a bit difficult, writing, that they haven't quite nailed it, or they're not sure they're getting it across to their children, or the strategies they're teaching, they're not seeing it come out in their writing. Where would you start with writing?
Well, you mentioned that teachers often lack confidence going in, because they feel a sense of isolation in going to teach writing, and some of them may not have written since they finished their studies. They may not be in the habit of being writers themselves, and so it becomes a big mountain to climb. One of the things I try to reassure teachers about is the fact that you do not enter the classroom on your own. You bring with you all the reading and writing that you've ever done, and every single book in your school library, in your classroom. There are what Frank Smith referred to as unwitting collaborators. They are authors and illustrators that can go with us and support us in our work, in our important work of helping kids to become confident and competent young writers. So I guess my starting point is you need to know something about writing, and you need to know something about how we best teach writing. One of the best ways to find out about writing is to, commit to being a writer yourself. And it's not just me saying this. The research indicates that kids are more likely to engage in writing when they see that their teacher is willing to participate in the very craft they're asking young writers to embrace. So I guess the starting point is your own writing. And there I would suggest that they, grab themselves a writer's notebook and quarantine just a small bit of time in the day to write down maybe some stories from their own life, observations, things like that, make lists. There's a whole host of things that they can do that can show the writers in their care that they too are risk takers, and they are people who value writing.
Now
the other connection, sorry.
Just before you go on, this is really interesting because Diane Snowball brought up the fact that a lot of kids are not seeing their parents write anymore.
Yes.
And they're not seeing their teachers write. Everyone's on their iPads or laptops, but they're not actually seeing adults around them write.
No, well, it's a bit like money. Money's become invisible. we transact business without actually anybody seeing the exchange of money. So writing has also become a little bit invisible in that sense too. One of the things I do is I surreptitiously take photos of people reading and writing in public areas. And share those with kids, because I want to highlight the fact that people are still doing those things. And even if they're writing on a laptop, in a digital form, writing on their phone, whatever, it's still writing. So I guess it's reminding them that this is writing as well. But you're right, often kids come out of households where they may not actually see living models of readers and writers. And so the teacher may be the only person in their life who actually practices these things in a visible sense.
So it's an even greater need for the teacher to be doing it.
The responsibility on teachers is even greater. So one of the messages that I'm continually giving teachers is that your reading and writing life has to be highly visible to the children in your care. I guess you're right. The responsibility for this has increased dramatically because it may be the case that you're the only living, breathing example of a reader and a writer.
But it can be fun though, can't it? We can.
Absolutely, it's fun. I'm coming up for 40 years of having writer's notebooks, and I'm just as enthusiastic about the next notebook as I was back in the first one back in 1983. So
that's good.
I'm happy to tell teachers, kids, anybody I meet that this is something that I love to do, and that there is a joy in tracking the footprints of your life. And one of the things that prompted me was investigating my own family history, because people hadn't written things down, and I found that a great frustration. So for me, there's 40 years of documentation of things that I've thought, places I've been, things that I've remembered. All of that is amply documented, because I think it's important that we leave those footprints for others.
So the teacher's an author just by default, by having their writer's notebook and writing in the classroom. They're an author in the classroom, and
absolutely,
they can show their work to the students. And then you've got this really rich reservoir of children's literature as well, haven't you?
You have, and there's your backup, there's your support. Teachers need to remember that they are the most proficient writer in that room, and they have to bring that to bear. They have to, I guess, let that influence the attitudes and the confidence of of the young writers in their care, because if they see that their teacher values these things, they're more likely to embrace them and go with them and want to be like their teacher.
Fantastic. So let's getting started with our writing. And what are some of the things that we really need to concentrate on, specific things in teaching writing, do you think?
Yeah, I think, I guess my starting point in every classroom is, where do you want to finish? Where do you want to end up? And if your goal is to produce self-directed, independent writers, okay, so if that's where you want to end up, here are the steps that you need to take in order to get there. And one of them is that notion of, first of all, being a writer yourself and understanding, I guess, the joy and the struggles that other writers encounter, particularly young writers. One of the most powerful things a teacher ever said to me was that she said, I went home last night and tried to write a persuasive essay. And she said, now I understand the difficulty that my writers have. And I nearly did cartwheels. It made my heart sing, because she understood their dilemma, their struggle, their, the whole idea of sitting down to write in a particular genre. The teacher understood finally. And that was a major breakthrough in the way that she went back and she spoke to them about how she understood the difficulties and what she found was supportive of her as a writer, and the parts that she now had to work on. I guess what I'm saying is that when that teacher shared her new understandings of the challenges that were inherent in trying to write a persuasive essay, her young writers really appreciated what she had done. So her credibility rose exponentially within that writing community. And it was just wonderful to hear her say those things. So, I often say, if you want kids to write in a particular genre, you really have to understand what it's like to face that particular challenge. But I guess we come back to the notion of building a community of writers, and the biggest factor in all of that is trust. They have to trust you as a teacher of writing, and what better way to build that trust than to show them that you're willing to be a risk taker and try the very things that you're asking them to do, that you're using the language of writing from the point of view of someone who knows writing and is engaged in it themselves, and you're encouraging them to follow your lead and to come with you on a journey together of discovery about writing. And as you mentioned earlier, Phil, you've got all that wonderful, rich literature to support you in that endeavour.
So I've got this piece of writing that we've got in a book, and the teacher then models that by writing their own version in large text on a big book, or a blank big book or something, or on a whiteboard. Then the children are seeing the teacher actually model that version of the writing that the teacher's doing, and then they're able to see what the struggles are. And
Correct. One of the things that I make a point of doing is I might identify an extract from a book that we've previously read, and I might say, look, let's go back and look at this aspect of craft that the writer has done. It might be a lead, it might be the use of dialogue, it could be it could be the way the story ends, it could be the variety in sentence structure, or it could be the use of such things as verbs or adjectives. So there's a whole host of stuff that you can get. And one of the messages that I recall Ralph Fletcher talking about was he said, don't milk all the juice out of a particular text. Save a little for next time. And that's really important. But you mentioned there about modelling. So what I show them is how, first of all, I might read it to them, that extract. Then I might show them as a piece of enlarged text and ask them to tell me what they notice as well, because often they give me insights to where they're at in terms of what they're identifying when they read like writers. Then I might say, well, here's what I noticed, and this is what I've tried to do. I've tried to write in the style of this particular author, or the other terminology I use, and I love using this terminology because they don't quite get what I mean, but I say I'm going to write under the influence.
Oh, right.
So I'm writing under the influence of that particular writer. So then I show my writing that I've done. As you said, it may be on a chart, it may be just enlarged on a screen, it may be I may enlarge what I've written in my notebook, and then I ask them to tell me what they notice. What am I doing? What have I learned from that other writer, and how have I applied that to my writing? So they do a critique on how well I've been able to write in the style of that particular author. The next step might be that we try it together.
Right.
We try it together, and then I invite them to try it on their own, in their own writing.
When you say try it together, what does that look like, just for teachers that have not tried this before?
We might co-construct a piece of text in that particular style. I'll give you an example from a wonderful book called Tanglewood by Margaret Wilde. Now, the lead in that particular book is "On an Island in the Middle of Nowhere, There Was a Tree." It's a really simple entry, but one of the things I noticed, what Margaret was doing, and she also does the same thing in her other wonderful book, Fox. She uses this same strategy, and I looked at it, and one of the things we know sometimes with craft, it has a particular name, like show, don't tell, but this didn't have a name. So I had to invent a name for it, and I called it Where, What.
Right.
On an island is where, in the middle of nowhere is where, there was a tree, which is what. Okay. So I called it Where, What. And then I gave them some examples in my own writing of using that same strategy as a lead, where, what. Mm-hmm. And then I said, let's try that together. So they tried it orally with a partner, and then they gave me some ideas, and we co-constructed a piece of text. Then they tried it again with a partner, and then they went and tried it in their own writing. And what was noticeable about that was that a lot of the kids said, now I've practiced this lead, I want to continue telling that story. Because one of the things I'd noticed in a lot of the groups that I was working with that particular strategy is that we were getting a lot of one day, on the weekend. Their leads were structurally okay, but they just lacked any zing. They lacked any originality. And so this gave them a writing strategy that really took them to a whole new area with their writing. And the thing about a strategy like Where, What is that it sticks. Yep. It sticks, and they can use it at will when they're looking for a way to start a piece of writing.
Now, Alan, is there doing that with them, and then just before they go on to the independent writing and they can try all these things out? Yep. Can there be an in-between sort of thing where they have little goes at this on a piece of paper while you're still in that mini lesson phase, and then after they've shared a few of those little mini goes at it, then they can go off to the independent writing? Is that another strategy as well?
You can use that as well. One of the things that I use a lot of talk in that earlier stage, because they can practice that on three fingers, where, what, and say at the beach under a rock, I found a crab. Mm-hmm. So they're it's fairly simple, and they just keep practicing those little things with a partner, so that when it comes to the writing, they've had multiple opportunities to practice it. So what you're doing is basically increasing the likelihood of them experiencing success when they go to that independent phase. Okay. So a lot of that stuff is done, really quickly with a partner or in a small group. But they can, if they're happy to write it down as we go, that's fine too. When I see kids taking notes or trying stuff, I'm overjoyed.
And you can also do a little quick write where you say, let's all do this, and you've got 1 minute to do it. And
effectively, it is a quick write, because you're really trying it fairly quickly. And then I'll say to them, look, if you've got another writing project that is really important to you that you want to go on with now that we've practiced that strategy, that might be something you might be able to use later on, tomorrow, next week, whatever. But if you want to continue with it, you may. So I'm opening up the option. So
And then if you share at the end of your writing workshop, there might be students that have used this new technique or strategy, and they can share what they've done. Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I'm looking for is evidence of kids taking up that idea and running with it, because even if a child says, well, I practiced it in the mini lesson, the tuning in part, but then I went on with something else. At least it's giving them feedback as to how it might be applied later on. Yep. Because sometimes something that we teach in a particular workshop may not have relevance on that particular day, but it's stored away, and it's fascinating how those seeds rise up at some later time.
Yeah, it may not come out in that lesson, but it'll come out at another time.
Correct. Yeah. It's just incredible how long sometimes kids, retain that information, and then it resurfaces.
Now, just a question about using this wonderful literature and all these wonderful writing examples, and kids having a go at rehearsing what that writer has done and then weaving that into their own writing. How are we just checking off against our Australian curriculum about what we're covering? Do you find it doesn't, it all gets covered anyway?
One of the things that I start with the writing, not the curriculum, because we have to teach at the point of need. So one of the things that I would be saying to teachers is that you need to, in your planning, you need to be bringing with you examples of great literature, but also writing samples, so that you can say, well, this is what my writers are showing me. Here's what they're indicating that they are doing well, and here's where the gaps are, so that we're teaching into the gaps. And then we look at the curriculum and say, well, if we teach this, which aspect of the curriculum are we covering there? Because they're indicating, it's a bit like, Hattie talks about the fact that, we often teach things that kids already know. So the writing samples is a great way of finding out where the gaps are, what they don't know.
Yep.
And so if our teachers in their planning are bringing writing samples and talking about that, there's the curriculum. There's what they need to be teaching. There's no point in going to the curriculum and teaching something that either the kids are not ready to do or already know.
And also, when we're looking for the things that we're going to teach them, like the strategies, we'll usually find that in any text we're reading, rather than having to find a special text that's got that particular thing in it. Is that right?
I think the stronger the connection we have to children's literature, the easier it is to find these examples we need.
Yeah.
And we, often have a book and we think, oh, I can teach that. I can immediately grab this particular book because I have confidence in it. So I've lost count of the number of times teachers have asked me to supply them with a list of potential mentor texts. And one of the things that I say to them is that you really have to learn to curate your own list, because it's. I could tell you, look, this book's fantastic, and it may not take off for you. It may not work for you. Whereas you have another book in mind that you know that you could teach that strategy really well from.
So the message is to get excited about your own books, and then
your own collection. Absolutely.
And from that collection, you'll probably be able to teach most aspects of the Australian curriculum. Yeah.
Correct. Because, you mentioned before that often a book can hold multiple, craft strategies in it that you could use at various times. So one particular text may have a multitude of applications, and you say, look, my young writers are having trouble with end punctuation. Here's a book with lots and lots of dialogue in it. Wow, I could use this to teach that. So when teachers are bringing in to their planning examples of texts that are working really well for them, they're cross-fertilising ideas. They're showing others the potential in a text, so that we end up with a range of texts that we can use rather than just relying on one.
Yeah.
So I think that's the value of that, is that you start to show others how you're using a text, and they say, oh, I hadn't considered that. Maybe I could use that text to teach this aspect of writing.
Fantastic. Now, Alan, I was going to just go back a bit to a name you mentioned, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about Donald Graves and what was so special about what he was talking about.
I'm becoming one of those rare people who is still in education, who actually taught through the revolution that Graves set in motion.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the work of Graves, I'm talking, from first-hand experience. When I first started teaching, I was already a teacher who wrote. I'd always been a writer, and so I guess I had that advantage. But when the research of Graves landed, and I started hearing and reading more about his work and his view of the child as a learner, it was music to my ears, because he knew that writing is a craft and that we need to teach it just as we teach other crafts in workshop conditions. Like a pottery teacher must practice the craft alongside their students, so a teacher must practice the craft of writing alongside their students.
And that was a new message for the time, wasn't it?
That was a message. That was a message that Donald Graves, mentioned time again. And he said that when we become sensitive observers of children's writing, the message becomes, I value the writing that you're doing so much that I'm also writing myself. So you aren't alone in finding it difficult. I do too, but here's how I work to overcome those difficulties. So one of the things I'm saying to this day that I learned from Donald Graves is don't just share your writing, share the process that produced it. Because kids need to know, how did you overcome problems? Where did you experience success? What did you learn from that? What will you keep doing? What will you do differently next time? There's so much that you can help kids with in talking about your process. So the teacher talks about the process of their writing in the hope that the young writer picks up some hints and strategies that they can then apply to their own writing.
Did he also talk about writing probably has to come from a passion within the child?
Well, correct. I mean, one of the things that he railed against was the control of topic and genre. And he said that you won't get children buying into writing, engaging in writing, if you're controlling every aspect of it. Because what they do, they become teacher pleasers, and they're only writing to placate their teacher. They're not writing because they have a deep desire to write about a particular thing, particularly if the topic, was foisted on them by the teacher. And, I'm still getting over the fact that my grade 5 teacher, gave us topics like My Life as a Pen, Autobiography of an Ant, things like this. And, we did it, but, there was something about it that irritated me and still irritates me to this day. And round about that time, I was starting to think, I want to be a teacher, but I don't want to teach like that.
You haven't kept your copy of those texts that you wrote?
No. I've written some poems about what happened then.
Oh yes,
how I felt about it, and but the fact that it's stayed with me all this time, Phil, is a fair indication of the impact that this type of teaching. I often wonder how many of my ex-classmates grew up with a disdain for writing. I think they were turned off. So I guess.
And they didn't realise they were a writer. Probably it wasn't awakened.
No. Yeah. That's right. And I mean, the other aspect of it was that Graves said, if you're only allowing kids to write 2 or 3 times a week, you're wasting your time. Okay. You are literally wasting your time. And when I came through primary school, we got to write 1 afternoon a week. 1 afternoon a week. Now, there are still classrooms where kids, don't get that opportunity to write on a regular basis, and they don't get to choose, make decisions about their writing. And, the research is telling us, if you don't have choice, you won't get voice.
Yeah, because I think there's still some people might be still having just one free writing session a week, and then the others are more structured.
Correct.
Formula.
Yes, I know the program that you're talking about.
Right.
I won't mention it by name, but yes, that's correct. And here, this is Graves back in 1980. I remember this, and he said we should look at the system that imposes meaningless topics, and not at the children for the reason so many get turned off writing. So they say that there was a lot of kid blaming. Oh, these kids are reluctant. These kids are not interested in writing. But we weren't looking at why. Why aren't they interested in writing? I mean, I've worked in classrooms over the last 20 years where kids audibly groan when you ask them to stop writing. They ask to take their writer's notebooks out into the playground with them because they want to keep writing. They find time to write in their own time. They find time to read, beyond the classroom because it's important to them. And it's all because of a climate that in that classroom that is supporting the writers to make decisions, to own the writing, to identify something that's important that they want to write about, that either they never want to forget or they think the world needs to know about.
And I in my classes, I found a real driver of their passion was when they got to share it with their friends.
You've tapped into something really important there, and that is the notion of audience.
Yep.
Now, what tends to happen, is that writing becomes something that goes on a wall. And as recently as last week, I was asking these young writers, I want you to have a vision of how you want to publish and where. So we need to ask them where. We need to broaden the concept of audience so that we can, I've had kids publish writing that we left in waiting rooms in the local doctors or at the hairdressers or at the chiropractors or at the bank. We put writing in the shop windows of vacant shops. We've put it all over the place. We've put it around the school in places that are visible. So we've put it in school newsletters. We've put it online. We've gone and put our writing in writing competitions. So we broaden. There's the notion of writing being authentic and purposeful. And so from day one, the moment young writers enter school, we need to be asking them the question, why are you writing this and who is it for? Yep. So the notion of audience becomes a natural consideration, so that we break down the notion that it's only for the people in this room and it's only for the walls in this room. So I guess, you're not writing it to please your teacher, and you're not writing it just for your classmates. You're building up the concept of a broader audience.
And then
that's vital.
And then when you do share it with others, that's where your English needs to be conventional so that others can read it.
Yes. And so there the onus becomes. I mean, I can read you something that is it sounds grammatically correct, but the spelling may be awful. So the other thing that a writer needs to understand is, where does spelling fit in? And it doesn't fit in before ideas, but it certainly goes before sharing.
Yep.
So we need to, once we've got our ideas trapped, we think of strategies for where do we find, if we're not sure about words, what do we do about them while we're composing? Do we interrupt the flow of our writing to get up and go and check the spelling? Absolutely not, because we'll sacrifice 300 words for the sake of one. So we need to know where spelling fits, and spelling comes directly after we've finished the composing. We go and check those words, and therefore we need a range of dictionaries or a range of sources to find those words, because we have a responsibility to our readers to try and make our reading reader friendly.
Yeah.
And that's where we look at spelling and punctuation, and we start to take care of those things. And one of the strategies that I've found highly successful, and I can't take credit for it, I learned it from Maurice Lurie, the Australian author, who wrote a wonderful book called The 27th African Annual Hippopotamus Race, which was a wonderful book around about grade 3-4. And Maurice used to say, before you put your writing in front of someone else, you need to read it aloud. And so whenever I go into schools, I say to kids, please don't put your writing under my nose until such times as you've read it and checked it yourself. So take it and read it to the walls and windows. Make sure that you own the responsibility and show respect for your readers by doing a quick edit So that, because if it doesn't make sense to the writer, it's not going to make sense to anyone else.
Yeah.
So there's where we start to build the ownership and responsibility for the writing, the spelling, and taking care of the grammatical features of your writing. So we teach them to proofread 3 ways. We read for meaning, then we read for grammatical elements, and then the third proofread, we put our finger on the last word and we read backwards for spelling.
Okay, that's a good technique. Yeah. Yep.
So, that way, and kids, when I ask kids, why do you think I got you to read it backwards? Because you don't want us to read for meaning. You want us to check the individual words. And I think, yes, you understand the significance of that. So there's 3 ways. So one of the things that has been coming up recently is an unfounded criticism that we're not teaching writing explicitly. And that's just not true.
Okay.
Because, the things that I've just mentioned to you are very, very explicit, and they're very, very much grounded in teaching kids to be responsible and showing them meaningful strategies that they can apply to their own writing.
To tap into someone like Donald Graves, what would be a good starting point in a book or a...
Oh, well, there's a wonderful book that came out in recent times written by 2 American educators and writers, Tom Newkirk and Penny Kittle, which is Children Want to Write. And it's basically an overview of his writing research and videos and presentations to teachers across his career.
Okay.
It's a wonderful book, really, really easy to read. And Tom Newkirk and Penny Kittle are 2 writers and educators that I admire greatly. So they've done a great job in putting this together, this particular book. And there are videos that go with it that show Graves in action. So that's a wonderful book. And I still believe the book that he wrote back in the 80s, Writing Teachers and Children at Work, it's one of my go-to books. I still grab it off the shelf. I'm holding it in my hand as I speak to you. And I've had that book for nearly 40 years. And, the messages in it, they still hold sway.
A great educator once said, I think it was Garth Boomer, said, always go back to the source.
Yes.
And go back to the original ideas where they came from. So,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'm currently reading a wonderful book that's come out of England, which is pulling together a large body of work and research around the teaching of writing. It's called Writing for Pleasure, Theory, Research and Practice by Ross Young and Felicity Ferguson. And one of the things that I note in every single chapter, there's some reference to Graves.
Yep.
At the end of each chapter, there's a listing of all the research that's gone into that particular chapter, and it's fascinating to see the messages that come from that that still hold sway in writing. And treating kids as writers and providing choice, reading, sharing, thinking, and talking about writing, mindful modelling and sharing of your own writing, teach a range of pre-writing strategies to kids, quarantine time for writing each day. These are things that these people are saying that Graves also said. So his research is holding up magnificently.
And Ralph Fletcher, he took it another angle on it, or was it similar?
Well, he's certainly been influenced by the research and writing of Graves, but there's also a practicality to Ralph's work in that he identified how we can use writers' notebooks in effective ways to support, the confidence and competence of writers by quarantining a place where kids could take risks and experiment. His book, Breathing In, Breathing Out, Keeping a Writer's Notebook, is a thin little volume that I bought while I was in New York, and it's one of my books that I regularly pull off the shelf and open up and just, reabsorb words of wisdom. It's just a fabulous book. And so too is his other book, What a Writer Needs, which is, looking at the various components that we need as writers to have in at our fingertips. And one of the interesting things that he talks about is choice. Again, it comes up there, something that Graves continually referred to, and Ralph talks about. He talks about mentors. He talks about beginnings and endings. He talks about a sense of place. And Ralph also strongly advocates wordplay, that we need to learn to have fun with language. And that's something that I identify really strongly with, not only through poetry, but just in writing in general, having fun. And finding your own significant subjects and topics that you want to write about. So Ralph drilled down into a lot of the things that Donald Graves was saying and took it to in new directions. So, I just greatly admire the work that Ralph's done, but I also, hold a special place in my heart because Donald Graves was one of the first educator writers that spoke to me very early on in my teaching career, and he sustains me to this very day.
It's fantastic. We've got these rich models to look at and help us.
Absolutely.
Any current resources or websites?
Well, that book that I mentioned, Writing for Pleasure, that's a recent one. Another one that I bought in recent times was another teacher writer, and his name is Tom Romano. He's an American educator and writer, and so I've certainly been tapping into a lot of the messages that Tom gives us. He's got Write What Matters for Yourself and Others, and of an eminently readable book, very practical. Another book that I continually delve back into is Natalie Goldberg's wonderful book, Writing Down the Bones. In fact, I was looking at that only last week. It's another one of those books like Ralph's book and Donald's book that I continually look at. It's from a more general perspective on writing, but there's a lot in Natalie's book that speaks to all writers. And if you are an inexperienced writer, there's so much in her book that is practical, and it's a great voice to have in the back of your head if you're having any doubts.
It's great to have these educators that are into writing. It's also great to have our authors who have just written books and have got amazing models of writing. And those together with all the rich literature that's out there, we've got amazing resources. Apart from that, all we need is the professional development and piece of paper and a pencil, really, isn't it?
Correct. It's we talk about reading as a portable magic, but so is writing, and that one of the points that I make with educators and with kids too is this is me writing at home, this is me writing in an airport, this is me writing at the beach, this is me writing in a park. It's another form of portable magic. You can write anywhere, and as long as you said, you've got something to write with and a notebook. And I always think of one of our fellow consultants in New York. I remember walking through the streets of New York with him, and he had a moleskin notebook that fitted in his shirt pocket. Every now and again he would stop and pause and just write a little note to himself and just stick the little notebook back in his pocket. And I thought, wow, there's notebooks of different sizes, but the portability of that little notebook was fabulous. And so, it's finding a notebook that suits your needs. And I've been doing that now for almost 40 years, and I've I've got about 12 notebooks sitting up there on the shelf, calling out to me saying, "Pick me next, pick me."
Now, Alan, writing starts at an early age, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I mean, I've got a 2.5-year-old granddaughter who's certainly making marks and scribbles, and we're doing little drawings already. So I'm hoping that she grows to believe that she is both a reader and a writer.
And those early marks gradually become conventional, don't they, over time?
They do.
Yeah.
They do. It's a journey. It's a journey, and already she's starting to she's identifying the letters in her own name at 2.5. So, things like this, and the fact that she now has favourite books. She'll go and pick out a particular book that she wants read multiple times. And so I'm seeing in her the beginnings of this really important journey. And they say that, the years from birth to 5 are critically important. Mem Fox gave us some really important reminders about the number of books kids need to have read before they even enter school. So in Isabel's life, there's a rich abundance of books. In fact, I read a story to her on the day of her birth. I didn't want to waste any time. I just thought, let's get on with this. One of the things that I haven't mentioned, and that is celebration. We need to, be in the habit of celebrating every little small breakthrough that a child makes as a learner. And, one of the things that I like to feed back to kids is, you did well as a group today in, developing your writing stamina, and you stuck at the task, and a lot of you were brave writers in tackling unfamiliar words. But usually there's something that an individual writer might have done that is worthy of note. And it may be something as simple as respecting the writers around them by not disturbing them. It might have been something as simple as finishing their writing and then helping another writer. It might have been something as simple as, I've finished writing and now I'm just going to quietly open a book and read. Simple stuff like that needs to be fed back, or where a writer shows what I love to call stickability, where they didn't give up, they kept going, or a writer sat and did some really important thinking before they commenced writing. And then it resulted in a powerful piece of writing. So we need to identify what writers are doing that are effective behaviours and feed that back to them on a regular basis. Yep. We need to be mindful of what we're seeing in front of us and saying to kids, let's keep doing that. That's a really great thing for a young learner, a young writer, a young reader to be doing. Because we want to reinforce the behaviours that we wish to become, familiar and constant in our classrooms. And the only way to do that is to say to kids, hey, I love what you were doing then. Keep doing that. That's great.
I had a long trip overseas in my 20s, and each day I kept a diary. And as the trip went on, I just felt like I was getting better and better as a writer because I was writing more and more. Like, I think, isn't it the more we write, the better we become?
Correct. It's there's nothing, they say, people, you're not born a writer, you become a writer through practice. And that exposure to language and rolling up your sleeves and diving into the ink. It's really important that, you practice what you want to become good at. And, I often think about other areas and other passions that I had on my way through, learning to kick a football, learning to bowl better as a cricketer. All of those things, it was practice, and it was learning from, the barriers and learning from the mistakes and seeing them as opportunities to learn and grow.
So step one for a teacher is to have lots and lots of independent writing happening in their classrooms every day, and lots of models of literature that they can use, but that independent practice is so important and purposeful, where the children are choosing the writing they're going to be doing. Is that, and they're practicing? Yeah.
You've actually prompted me, because one of the things that I've sort of railed against is when it becomes independent writing in name only, and teachers will sometimes talk about, now we're going to do independent writing. But what happens is that the children are writing independently on a set genre or a set topic. So it's not, in the strictest sense, it is not independent writing.
It's not chosen independent writing.
It's it's not. So when a child chooses the topic, the genre, and the length of the writing, that is independent writing. And that's what we need. That's what we need to be aiming for. So that until such times as, kids stop asking the question, how much do you want me to write? Or, that type of thing, they're not truly independent writers. So that's why we have to be conscious of what we're calling independent.
Great note to finish on, I think, Alan. And just before we go, though, I know that you're delivering an address to the ALIA, that's the Australian Literacy Educators Association National Conference this year, and you're delivering what's called the Donald Graves Address.
Correct, Phil. Yeah. Yes.
That's quite an honour. Yeah.
It is an honour. I'm quite humbled by this, and it's a rare privilege, and I'll be stepping into a rare space. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think of some of the esteemed speakers that have gone before me. I'm very conscious of that. I've been preparing for this since last October, when I first found out that I was going to be doing this address. So I've been delving deep into Donald's work, and I hope that I can do him justice, and also raise a few issues, and maybe restart the revolution that Donald first started back in the 80s. And so I'm very much looking forward to this opportunity. I'm quite excited.
It's fantastic. Now, what city is it in this year?
It's in Darwin this year. In July. July the 6th to the 10th. And I'm, as I said, I'm very much looking forward to presenting in person at that particular conference. It will be recorded, but as I said, I'm getting ready to
Maybe we can share with people how they can access the recording if they can't get there.
Well, I'm assuming it will be available on YouTube, but as previous addresses have been. But as I said, I'm just preparing.
That's
at
right.
the moment.
Also, you're kindly preparing for a webinar we are going to do soon on this same topic, but with the ability to show and demonstrate some things to us visually. So that will be exciting as well. So we look forward to Alan doing that with us. And Alan, any final thoughts about the teaching of writing today?
For those of you who remain hesitant or lacking in confidence, my strong advice is to read as much about writing as you can, talk about writing, and then roll up your sleeves and dive in and have a go for yourself. I think that's really important, that you show the writers in your care that you're willing to be a risk taker. I can assure you, I've seen it in so many teachers where they've gone in and shared their writing, what a difference it's made, because they tell me, I'm really enjoying my teaching now. I think I'm so much more effective as a teacher of writing because I'm talking about something that I know intimately. And I think that's really, really important.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alan, and thanks for the podcast today. Wonderful to hear all your amazing advice. And I hope the teachers out there have got some things that they can start with today or tomorrow when they start teaching. Thank you, Alan, and thank you everyone for being with us today.
Thank you, Phil. My pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.